Once again, it is my privilege and pleasure to come and spend these few moments of your time. Humanity stands on the very edge of the shifting consciousness. Not the shift in consciousness as yet, but the shifting consciousness that is shaking up the very foundations of reality as it appears. So, shall we say, so many threads from many places are coming together in a standing place where the old mechanisms no longer can operate. Enough for us to begin a conversation.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Mirk. Thank you for being with us again today. Today I'd like to start by talking about the new information. Well, it's not really new, but the information that you've shared with me recently. Last week when we talked a lot about waking up in the shifting consciousness, I felt that there was a real sense of urgency to the information. Am I right in assuming this?
Of course, the urgency is the shaking ground. You understand, humanity has no longer any leeway, shall we say. Already it is clear to everyone that the way forward is not on the same track, shall we say, as it was appeared, at least in the past. However, many people are waiting for things to get back to normal, but they have forgotten that normalcy was not, shall we say, serving the planet as a whole. So much has become more and more evident that you cannot simply continue on and leaving behind the rest of the planet. So one of the great shifts in consciousness is the awakening to unity. The awakening that every action has consequence, and one always needs to first of all ask for the consequence. What is, if I take this action, what result do I expect that is in line with the action? Of course, one could simply delude oneself, thinking that it has no effect. So many times humanity has said, well, what can I do as an individual? I have no effect. But in reality, every action has an effect. First of all, within the locality, that is the local field, but it accumulates and spreads and so on. So does that answer the question that, of course, it is urgent in the sense for so many human beings, unless it is urgent, nothing happens. How much time have you been given before urgency arises?
So I I've tried to tell people what you've shared with us, and I guess some people are really not ready to hear it. They're either interrupting me and literally saying they don't want to hear anything negative, or there's those that say that's really interesting, whether they believe it or not. They find it interesting and then they just move on.
You have to recognize that whatever someone perceives is in their world of perception. So many people think that something they see is negative, rather than seeing that the way they are seeing it is negative. They do not want, shall we say, to be accountable for their own projections, their own negativity. You understand, and you are not going to change such a person. Such a person, of course, must meet self, as has been said so many times, must meet the consequences of that perception. If you do not want to see what is happening, then you will meet the result of that. Shall we say it is a little like driving on the road. You are on the road and you simply say, I don't like what I'm seeing. I'm going to close my eyes and keep driving. The consequence is obvious.
I have been told before that words don't really teach. So how useful is it really sharing these messages through just words?
Shall we say supportive? You understand what is happening in your world today is many people coming together with momentum. They are finding that what is going to change things. It is not sitting in the silence. What you have called the silent majority is becoming more the silent minority. Louder and louder comes the calls from more and more people, while less and less people, shall we say, can control everything. It is, shall we say, an underswell. You think that it is going to happen on the surface where people can see it. But of course, the shifting consciousness is a groundswell. It is shifting the ground underneath, where everyone thinks they are aware. Does that make some sort of sense? Because you understand, for most of humanity, the idea of a shift in consciousness is a conscious shift, but it is not going to occur in that fashion. It is not going to be a general shift in consciousness as it has been in the past. It is a radical shift where a sudden explanation changes the entire patterns. Does that make some sort of sense? I have been saying all along that individuals do not jump the barrier, if you like. Everyone accumulates together and the shift occurs en masse.
So if you can offer some clarity, I do follow other channelists and have been listening to a number of them with a high profile that I know of, and they're not really talking about the dire situation that we're in with a sense of urgency that we've been speaking about. They tend to more focusing on the building people up and being positive. Can you make comments to that as to why? Or
one has to tap into the underlying framework, if you like. And for so many, the ideas are, need to be profound in order to, shall we say, change the driving force. Shall we suggest that there is an adoption of the idea of spirituality, as if the spiritual will come down to the pre-existing reality, that people will, in their physicality, tap into something beyond it, rather than the spirituality is the whole. There is no universe outside of the consciousness, outside of the willingness to express what is, shall we say, needed. The physical world has to be rebuilt, has to be reimagined. And it will not occur while one is inside of it. The inside of it, in the sense that you can manipulate the physicality from within. If you are really clear, creation, as it occurs from the divine. And when that is understood, one has to be focused in the divine for creation to be reimagined. That has to be a shift out of the physicality into the higher realms in order to manifest. Does that make sense?
A little, yeah.
So, shall we say, if you are ingrained in a physicality, if you are talking about managing the physicality, then of course you want to remain positive. But if you want to rise to the divine and to evaluate, what do you see? Do you see a world of enormous positivity? Or do you see a world that is out of harmony? And is it positive to call it out of harmony? Is that a positive statement? Of course not. It is saying to you must change. You cannot continue destroying. You are destructive, not individually, of course not, but as a whole. And every individual destructive activity is building into the whole. So what occurs in your so-called social media? People are destructive. Are they constantly uplifting? Of course some, but often in the main, if someone doesn't like what they see or hear, then they want to be negative, and they want to say the other person is the negative one. How negative can that be? Rather than looking inside what is being offered. Do you follow what I mean? Is there an upliftment? Is it uplifting back to the divine, to reimagine the possibilities? Does that make some sort of sense?
Yeah, Yeah, it does.
So you want to remain positive, but not always will that work. And so far, humanity has continually overridden and destroyed. The very fall of humanity, shall we say, from the higher realms, the descent into physicality is designed to bring about the understanding of consequence. Often it was called karma, as if lifetime after lifetime is carried forward in some form of punishment. But is that valuable? But if you see that your actions produce results, and those results will come back into the world. So shall we say, if you look into your history, what is the history? It is the legacy that led to where you are in the present moment. All of it, the history is designed to shift attitudes, to wake up to the reality and to take action, to rebuild harmony, to reassert authority. That is the divine authority each individual is given. Or I want to say in a sort of humorous way, the authority individuals are burdened with, because you have to use it for the benefit of the whole. Yeah. And in the main, most people use their authority for personal gain.
Yeah.
Not looking for the consequence that it will play out on the whole, either in the moment or eventually.
So you talked recently about a great rebalancing, or rebalancing where everything is taken away and distributed equally. Does that mean that the average person could lose their house or everything they've worked hard for? Or does this mean more that the super wealthy who have been hoarding their billions are more likely to be rebalanced?
Let us look at it in a sort of different framework. Everyone needs somewhere to live. Everyone needs somewhere to live that does not, shall we say, consume them. Everyone needs enough food on their table. Everyone needs enough to survive. Everyone needs enough of the right things for social integration. If you unbalance that in whatever way, then of course there is going to be internal conflict. One thinks the internal conflict is between others, but if one is living inside of a community, inside of a society, inside of a nation, and all of those nested fields of influence, it is going to be a psychological conflict as well. And so many people deal with their psychological conflict by expressing anger. They want to pick on others that they see are the fault. Do you follow what I mean? But the consequence is poor health, because you cannot have anger in your being without it affecting the organs that deal with such organizations. The physical body is not free of the psychological one that one has indoctrinated with all of the ideas, because one wishes to live in an unbalanced world. Does this make some sort of sense? So does it mean that individuals will lose their houses? Of course not. But look at it. What is under threat by the actions of humanity? Is it simply what are calling climate changes? Of course, but it affects the coastal zones, which are the best and most expensive places to live. Coastal zones. Are they going to be inundated? Of course, because humanity simply refuses to take notice. But the conflict is not a physical one in the at all. It is a spiritual one. It is in the divine field that manifests. Do you follow what I mean? If one has lost one's way in the definition, shall we say, of the spirit of equality, that is divine reward. Do you follow what I mean?
Yeah.
So if you have lost your way in the divine, then the manifestation of that loss of direction begins to take shape. It is not separate. You cannot simply say there is a physical world, and some people think there is a spirit, or no, I think there is a spirit and God is looking after me because I go to church and so on. I pray to the divine in some fashion, but it is not the same as divine equality, divine harmony, the divine looking out for the creation as a whole, including all of the species and all of the creation itself. You understand? Even the very structure of the planet is expressing divine thought. So you look at it as if the climate is something in the clouds in the sky, but in the end, the climate is a psychological framework of the entity called your planet, your homeland, as if it is just as real as your own inner workings. The planet has its own reality. You follow what I mean?
Yeah.
So shall we say human consciousness is the highest order of consciousness, given the ability to perceive reality from the divine perspective. And that is called awakening.
Thank you. So would you say that if we see a problem around us, then we are part of the problem? So if there's something around us that we don't see as a problem, but we're conscious of it existing, like we all know it's there, is it still a projection of our own inner selves? For example, like malaria in Africa, I'm conscious of it, but it doesn't affect me personally. Am I part of the problem still?
I want to say, within the localized field, of course not. But as the nested fields inclusive, of course. Does humanity in another location have the answers? Of course. Does it apply the answers? If not, then it is separated from the divine. But it is not an individual task. You follow what I mean? It is an awakening task. Shall we put it another way? Does the deserts in Africa affect the climate that is destroying the wealthy? You understand what I mean?
Yeah.
Does the desert that was created by one portion, and now it is returning the reward of it? And so is the malaria, shall we say, reflective of the whole? Does the malaria and the ecological framework and everything out of balance in that particular locality, is it free of affecting the whole? Do you follow what I mean? Everything is interconnected, interdependent, interrelated.
Okay, thank you. So you said that this is the first time in history that we all shift in consciousness as a whole, the entire planetary population.
I want to put it in your history. You understand, your history goes back a certain distance. But in the history of all, shall we say, eternity, and eternity is not localized in that sense. So shall we say, of course, there have been such major shifts in consciousness, but not in your written historical memory, not in the memory, shall we call it even the underlying psychic memory. But there have been shifts in consciousness in other times. And this time, shall we say, is the first moment that, shall we say, technology as you have designed it has connected the forces of all together. This is the first time in history that you have the ability to speak as one unit.
Yeah. So can you give us some advice, people that are going through their awakening, when they have awakened to the shift in consciousness, how can they then help? What sort of advice can you give?
I want to say, when you give advice to anyone, the first inclination is to be, shall we say, to be pushed away. No one wants to be told what they should do. Even if they ask, what should I do? Do not really want you to tell them what to do, because it plays on their own selfhood. So shall we say, first of all, the shift in consciousness as awakening is the ability to create reality, to, shall we say, create one's own way of life, one's own happiness. shall we say then, if you are in a space, you are always happy, you have always everything you need. There is no sense of loss or lack. It doesn't mean that you simply purchase, consume everything, but it is awareness that certain things are good for you and certain things are not. Do you understand? Then you imbalance, and then you are demonstrating this. If someone comes to you and asks you, simply saying, well, I've learned how to create my reality. I could let you in on some of what I've learned, but it's up to you. Do you follow what I mean?
I do.
Then they are in the position of asking how to. And you can offer, shall we say, coaching. If you learn this, let's take it a little bit at a time. Let us learn what is divine source and what is my mind. Do you follow what I mean? So it is not, shall we say, advice as such, but walking alongside. And if you look at your life, someone has always walked alongside until you have got, shall we say, the basic ideas, the basic structure, the basic patterns, the tools, shall we say, and the way to work with the tools. Always you have been shown that, whether it is from direct divine intervention or it is another human being. Does this offer some direction?
Yes, it does. Thank you.
So you are not setting yourself up as the expert, but simply, shall we say, the words are, this is the way I've done it. These are the steps I've taken, but you must find your own steps. I can share mine. I can be a guide in your unfolding.
Great, thank you. So when we go through the process of understanding truly that we create our own reality and that we have the ability, what you called it, to manufacture whatever reality that we want, how do we then discreate any really sticky bits that may have been programmed, part of our subconscious, and are creating a reality or fragment of a reality we do not want?
Remember this. Creation happens when one is caught up in it, when one is feeding it with attention. If you take your attention off it, you see it as it is. This is something that I am feeding. I am simply going to take my attention off that, and I am going to use my attention in a direction that I prefer. Do you understand what I mean? So you are removing the attention that is feeding it.
So do you then have to become conscious of the attention? What if you're you're not conscious of the triggers or the behavior that's resulting in the result?
Of course, if one is not tracking, shall we say, if one is not experiencing the result, if one is pushing the result away and pretending it does not belong to you, you are not involved inside of it, then there is no path out of there. because the threads that you are looking to follow are inside the creation. When you put yourself into the creation and experience it and what it has to offer, the creation has some wisdom in it. Even the most difficult have wisdom. And when you learn the wisdom of them, they dissolve in their own fashion. You understand, experience is for wisdom. And as soon as the lesson has been integrated, not just learned, you can learn something and not apply it, but it is integrated into you. You understand this is what occurs. Then you will see it is the consequence of action. It is the consequence of beliefs, of indoctrination, and so forth. Let us take an example of this. Humanity, in, shall we say, most cases, is indoctrinated into the certainty that the physical world is the eternal world. This is the world that exists and nothing can be done about it. Therefore, every challenge and problem in the physical world has to be dealt with in a physical way. Then you have to roll up your sleeves and begin, shall we say, digging oneself out of the muck. If one realizes the physical world is simply the manifestation in time and space of the inner constructs, the inner frameworks, the conflicts of the inner world manufactured, manifested in physicality in order to gain time and space in order to gather the wisdom. Do you understand what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So shall we say the loss of wisdom of any situation creates the situation. Until the two are brought back together, then one must continually manufacture the same old situations over and over and over again. And that then, shall we say, the bringing together of situation and wisdom is waking up.
Nice, thank you. So are there any, in terms of like tackling our subconscious programming, that
I want to stop you in your tracks. Subconscious programming, shall we say, is a creation that puts it out of reach.
What can we call it instead? Then?
Shall we say that if you shine the light of awareness, if you look inside your activities and your, if you look inside the creation that you are experiencing, you will find that the unconscious is not so unconscious. The purpose of all life is bringing consciousness to the unconscious.
So I was wondering if there was some sort of process or modality that could help people with that.
Once again, experiencing you understand, the unconscious programming creates certain experiences. If you experience the experience, that is, if you are not being denial, if you are not pushing it away by, shall we say, I don't like having this feeling. So what the feeling you are having is the feeling of not liking the projected feeling you think might occur. You are not feeling the actual feeling of the experience. It is pushed away. It is on another, in another reality. Does this make sense? Mm-hmm. So if you cease avoiding it, if you see it and recognize I am pushing this away because I haven't yet fully experienced what it is, without putting an idea into it. You understand? Once I take my preconsidered ideas off and simply sit in it a while, explore it, see what can be gained, look around from within that experience and look for the wisdom. What is the reward for being here? What am I being rewarded with? Shall we take an example? You have a sense that you want to be, shall we say, free of a addiction. So you experience what it feels like to be addicted to that substance or thing, and you sense that right away when you are experiencing it, what a good feeling it has. Do you follow? Yeah. You are now not avoiding it, but you are experiencing it and realizing how good it feels. What is the wisdom from this? Shall we say, the wisdom from it, or at least one of the wisdoms, is that I am not getting enough in my life to feel this good. So I am having to rely on this other activity to get fed what I am not feeding myself in other ways. You understand? Now you can look at it and ask, what else would there be that would give me the same uplifting feeling? What would I have to create that would be beneficial for myself and for others? You understand, unless you put in and for others, you are still individualizing and causing separation. And you will not find that sense of goodness in separation.
Very good. Thank you. Can you tell us more about the steps of how to commune with nature?
A good question to follow straight on. Most people see nature separately, as if nature is something that they are observing outside of self. But the nature is you. This is who you are. And if you see something in nature that is not connecting with you, then what in yourself are you not connected with? What is it that brings out that sense of belonging in the world? Do you follow what I mean? So you walk in nature and you see, shall we say, the tree, the brother, the sister tree. This is your family. Do you follow what I mean? It is your family. It is welcomed in to your home, and your home is the field that you expand. Do you understand? So if you feel yourself in your body, you are happy that your body is who you are. And if you put your attention a little further out, you say, this is my personal space. Do you follow what I mean? I don't want anybody in my personal space. And this is my family environment. I can include my children, my husband, my mothers, and everyone else in that field. Now, if I say, here is the tree, this is my family, come into my field. You and I are one, come into my personal space. So you extend your personal space out and you touch the tree. You hold the tree in your personal space as part of the importance. Do you follow what I mean? You are then not separate from it. It is part of who you are.
Beautiful.
And then you begin to appreciate everything in nature. It is not a separate world. It is my world. This is my walk in nature. This is my connection to nature. Nature and I are family.
Fantastic. Thank you. Is there anything else you'd like to share with us today?
As I started, humanity is standing on the edge of the most amazing shift. But it will be as difficult and as upsetting as project onto it. If you are willing, shall we say, to fly, then one has, first of all, to jump into the unknown. Do you follow what I mean? If you trust the divine, you'll fly. Of course, it doesn't matter whether you live or die, because you will always be eternal. But if you feel that you are living a single life as long as you can against all the odds, can you possibly jump into the unknown? Of course not. Then you are trapped in the physicality and the difficulties that presents. Does that make some sort of sense?
It does.
So humans are standing on the edge of an awakening that is so freeing after a long, many millennium of waiting. But shall we say, many have to give up their destructive tendencies. They have to give up their victimhood and their aggressorhood. Both sides of the coin. Thank you for your time and patience. So life progresses, and with it, one notices just how in tune one is becoming. How do you notice it? Because you are experiencing it. Thank you for your time and good afternoon.
Thank you very much.